Welcome, everyone, to RB1 Colon, a fantasy football podcast, part of the Fake Teams podcast channel. I am the consummate professional. Didn't want the Patriots to go 16-0 anyways. And best friends with the Oracle, your humble host, Pete Rogers. And I am joined by all of the guys for the first time in a long time. We have the man formerly known as Steve Timberland, caster of the double reverse chutzpah and DK Metcalf's number one admirer, resident old man Clark Barnes. It is Sabatura, the captain of the Buccaneers bandwagon and ring bearer at Aaron Rodgers and Danica Patrick's wedding, the working girl Jordan Smith, and finally, fantasy football's premier internet doctor, Larry Fitzgerald, lone admonisher and a fan of what scientists lovingly call, quote, facts, the ginger normal man, Nick Butterford. Guys, how are we doing?
Doing great, Pete.
Good, Pete.
Terrific.
Jordan, it's been so long and now you're sick, but how are you? How was your expeditions in the wide world yonder?
It was very great. I did not get to watch a lot of football, so it's been a rough couple of fantasy football weeks for me. But yeah, enjoyed it. Wouldn't trade it though.
Good. Well, we understand if you were here mostly for just moral support rather than for fantasy football intellect and insight, given what you've been up to in the last few weeks.
I did watch a little bit of football yesterday, but I turned it off because the Packers decided they didn't want to go on the plane to Los Angeles. They just stayed at home. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just stay at home then too.
Well, maybe I won't watch football if they're not watching football or playing.
Exactly.
Football. Exactly. Yes, I can tell you that both Becca and her mother, because she was talking to her mom on the phone whilst the game was coming to a conclusion, were very confused and very upset as to why the Packers were losing to the Chargers.
It's just one of those, I feel like every team's going to have them by the end of the year. One of those losses where you're like, well, how the hell did they lose to that team, et cetera.
Hey, man. Didn't want to go 16-0 anyways, or you didn't want to go 15-1 anyways. The losses make the Super Bowl run all the more exciting.
12-4, that's the sweet spot.
There it is. That's how you win a Super Bowl. All right, we got lots to talk to. Lots to talk about. I have quickly peeling back the onion curtain. So Becca and I had a Halloween party that we threw on Friday, and it was a great success. Had a lovely time. But we made the mistake of it's not a real mistake, but we provided alcohol. And then we're told everyone be like, hey, also bring something, be considerate, bring a six-pack or whatnot. So, of course, everyone did. And now we find ourselves with just way too much beer and alcohol in our house. And so we're very slowly making our way through it. And I am having a beverage right now, and I'm realizing that even just a couple sips and my tongue, the heaviness of my tongue increases dramatically.
Yeah, you gotta get those wares up for the winter months. You're in Michigan now. Gets cold.
What I once was, I know. So anyways, we have lots to talk about today. We have week 9 tidbits that we'll get into. Then we're going to turn our view to the future. We're going to maybe do a little bit of fantasy playoff prep. A little helpful tidbit there. Obviously, talk waiver wire. But first, before we get into all of that, it is time to give Week 9 fantasy MVPs. Clark, we'll start with you. Who was your most valuable player for Week 9?
I'm going to broken record it this week and nominate our Lord and Savior Lamar Jackson. A lot of people, including myself, got to actually sit down and watch Lamar in real time instead of in the condensed version of NFL Game Pass against a really good team in the Pats. And God, he looked amazing and put up another huge game, cementing his place as the QB1 this season. So maybe not real MVP, who I feel like you have to tip the hat to Russell Wilson, but fantasy MVP, Lamar Jackson once again.
Yep, I have Lamar as my fantasy MVP for the week too, because he did exactly what a fantasy MVP should do: go into the most difficult matchup and decidedly handle it with no problems, score you 3 total touchdowns, and get everything that you wanted from him. He was someone who, leading up to the week, I was constantly like, do I start him? Do I not start him? I gave advice, wrote articles, was all the whole 9 yards, like other guys who you could stream. And then what do you know? He goes out and just isn't even affected by the Patriots defense. So 100% my MVP for week 9. Nick, who do you have?
So mine's kind of just pat myself on the back here. I'm going with DK Metcalf. He caught 6 of 9 balls, 123 yards, a touchdown, a 2-point conversion. He took the overall, going into Monday night, the overall wide receiver 4 position in half-point PPR. You were drafting this guy in like the 14th round, and he's giving you top 5 wide receiver production. But most importantly, what I want to do here is just run a commercial for the rundown, because so far, I think we've accurately called every week of DK Metcalf production since we started. And so if you want to know when to start DK Metcalf, go read or watch the rundown.
There you go.
Yeah, don't let the baby face fool you. Nick's bringing it on the rundown show.
The baby face that's now grown his beard back. He wants to get rid of the ginger normal man. He wants to get back to the ginger woodsman.
Dude, it's getting cold fast in Seattle.
gotta warm the face up. Jordan, who is your MVP for the week?
My MVP for the week may not ever be the MVP for the rest of the season. It's going to be Kenyan Drake of the Arizona Cardinals. He came in pitching relief basically after the Cardinals lost David Johnson and Chase Edmonds to injury, coming in on a Thursday night against the San Francisco 49ers, when I'm sure that a lot of people kind of just plugged him in as like a prayer because they needed somebody to fill in. And he stepped up and produced admirably against a really good 49er defense. So MVP to him for going above and beyond and making that panic start look good.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue because week 9 fantasy tidbits. Always got to do the T hand. We'll start right off with the backfield conundrums that we kind of saw develop this week. And starting in Arizona, it's easy to forget that Thursday night Kenyan Drake went crazy, like you said, against the 49ers. 110 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and then 52 through the air. So Jordan, since you brought him up, is this legit? And the second question is, should David Johnson owners be terrified and be selling him at all costs?
I feel like the move to add Kenyan Drake either says something a lot about what sort of injury what sort of injury David Johnson might have. Even though he is expected to return in week 10, I'm not entirely certain on what Chase Edmonds' status is, but the fact that they went out and traded for a running back, I don't know. I kind of like to believe that perhaps maybe he might be in like a rotation like the 49ers running backs or like the Packers running backs, where they can give you a little bit of something. I don't know. It might diminish David Johnson's role, though. If you can sell high on him, then maybe that might be the best move going forward.
Yeah, if you can sell on DJ's name, then really at this point in the year, if you can sell on somebody's name, like their draft value outside of Saquon and all that, that's probably pretty solid. Chase Edmonds is going to be out for a few more weeks because he's got the hamstring injury, and soft tissue is always a few weeks, but it was deemed pretty severe. So maybe 2 or 3 more weeks, given DJ's injury, injuries, I guess, the ankle and the back. I absolutely think Kenyan Drake stays a part of this backfield.
Yeah, and he looked great coming. I mean, we knew, like, this is the thing that I was surprised in last week. So I do the weekly buy and sell column on fake teams. And I had, does Kenyan Drake now have fantasy value now that he's in Arizona? And a lot of people, the vast majority of people who voted, were saying that they're selling that idea. And I was surprised because we saw Kenyan Drake be productive in Miami from time to time when they actually decided to use him and had a good offense around him. And given the success that Chase Edmonds had just getting plugged into that, Arizona offense, I was all like, well, Kenyan Drake's a good player. You're going to put him in there and you're going to get good results. I didn't expect, obviously, his first game there with, against the 49ers on Thursday night for him to suddenly go off. But I think it's a great sign. And I think that if you're a DJ owner, I am selling him for whatever I can possibly get, because I don't see how he's going to come back. Even if he does come back healthy, he's not going to come back to the workload that we all expected him to have at the beginning of this season. He's going to come back into a committee, and Kenyan Drake is clearly going to be a big part of that moving forward. Another running back conundrum that cropped up this week was the Steelers' backfield, which was all kinds of banged up to the point where there were reports that they thought about trading for Le'Veon Bell to bring him back in, which would just be the most beautiful circle of, time is a never-ending circle, flat circle. What's the True Detective thing? Time's a flat circle. Isn't that it? Yeah. Okay. I'm getting nods because everyone's muted. So it was Jalen Samuels and Trey Edmonds who got it done Sunday against the Colts. Samuels through the air, 13 catches on 13 targets for 73 yards. And then Edmonds on the ground for 12 carries and 37 yards. Nick, Edmonds is the one who's wildly more available. Can we expect this split moving forward? Do you think that you're going to see Edmonds get the groundwork and Samuels get the air, or is this kind of a one case off and Jalen Samuels is really the guy who you should be targeting in this Steelers backfield?
Well, so I think what's important to keep in mind with this is that Jalen Samuels, I'm pulling up the box score right now. The dude he led the team in targets and catches. He had 13 targets and he caught all of them. Regardless of format, that's outstanding usage. He posted, I think, 70-some yards through the air and still racked up 8 carries on the ground. So even in a matchup where we saw someone in the backfield out carry him, he still had 21 touches. Like that's bell cow usage.
Round of applause for that quick math by Nick.
Thanks. But it's kind of like the I'm totally blanking on the backfield right now. But anyway, I mean we could see somewhat of a, I don't know, maybe a Denver situation, probably not. Anyway,
or do you see like the Chargers? Because the Chargers is a pretty like even split. Melvin Gordon gets the groundwork, and then Austin Eckler gets the pass work. Is that what you're thinking, or are you thinking it's more so like Denver, where it is like Philip Lindsay is the clear kind of 1A, and then Royce Freeman is a 1B, and you can get good gains from him, but really Lindsay's the one who you want to own?
No, I was thinking of the Niners, but the Chargers is a lot better. That's a lot better. But the thing is, the primary back in this situation is the pass catcher. I'm not shying away from Jalen Samuels. That being said, I also, if I've got a bench spot to burn, or I'm in need of a running back, adding Edmonds is not a bad idea at all.
Moving on in the tidbits. In the week 9 tidbits, we suddenly saw a Dolphins offense that came out of nowhere. I mean, not out of nowhere. I mean, any team with Ryan Fitzmagic on it, that team is going to have some offensive production. And we saw it Sunday, 3 touchdowns, 288 yards through the air. Preston Williams catching 2 of those touchdowns for 72 yards. DeVante Parker had 57 yards in a touchdown. And Mike Gesicki, tight end coming out of nowhere, 95 yards on 6 catches. Clark, do the Jets defense, is their defense just garbage, or is the Dolphins offense worth buying into?
I think the Jets defense is not good, and the Jets are just not good. So it's a good matchup to look to play against. Even though I've been hyping a little bit of DeVante Parker, he is just fine. I would not look at this as some great change in the Dolphins offense. If you are desperate at wide receiver and need to continue playing DeVante Parker, that's fine. But you should not take this as an opportunity to jump on the Dolphins bandwagon. They are still horrible. They just won a game, and I know that that's fresh in our memory. But don't run out and drop someone you've been hanging on to or think that this is going to be kind of what we see for the second half of the season. DeVante Parker is fine. He's a wide receiver 3 flex option, but I would not let this one victory change the way you're thinking about the Dolphins.
So I'm a little excited here, and I want to kind of try to get you back on the DeVante Parker bandwagon. So unless I missed
Clark
it,
founded the DeVante Parker bandwagon, has talked himself off of it, and now Nick's like, no, come back on, we need you.
Yeah, someday Clark and I are going to see eye to eye on receivers, but it is not today. So did you cover this in the intro? I don't think I heard it. So both Preston Williams tore his ACL. He's out for the year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is news. There's injury news that we'll get to, Nick. So yeah. I mean, whatever. It's cool. You spoil it. Whatever. I was trying to build the suspense. Get people's hopes up.
Are you going to cover suspension news too?
Yes, Mark Walton also got suspended. Oh,
Okay.
Nick.
But
yes,
this
the
is
Dolphins
thing,
offense is now gone from like this, like, ooh, interesting fantasy goldmine to it's basically DeVante Parker is who you want to buy.
That's the thing. I mean, it's realistic now that the guy can be racking in like 15 targets a game. So screw it. If you need a receiver, that's awesome. That's elite usage. It's not going to be pretty, but like, I don't see a way that he doesn't get double-digit targets every week. And Kalen Ballage is Kalen Ballage, but a bell cow is a bell cow at this point. I don't know who else they have on their roster. So if Mark Walton's out for the next, oh God, don't get excited about him. But
can anyone say Jay Ajayi reunion?
Oh, that's fun. All right, yeah. I'll abdicate talking about the Dolphins for now. We can bring it up in a little bit.
Yeah,
DeVante Parker, expected air yards champ.
It finally paid off.
Yeah, I hope I don't come across as saying sell and abandon DeVante Parker. I just want to temper expectations because it is going to be up and down because the Dolphins are just bad. So there's something to a Cardinals offense where they have had 3 running backs of varying talent levels show that they can be productive. It's obviously a good scheme that features a running back, and as long as you have a certain level of skill, you're going to go off and do fine, even though the team's not that great. The Dolphins is very much a different story, I think, with the up and down nature of their game, and we are kind of closing in on the fantasy playoffs here. So it's not a sell recommendation. This is just saying let's not mortgage your team's future to run out and get old Mr. Parker.
It's also always scary buying into the Dolphins because their whole premise of existing this season is to lose games. And so, like, you don't necessarily want to buy into an offense that is like sole purpose is to not score a lot of points so that they can lose games.
I
Counterpoint.
Get at him.
Jordan, what's your counterpoint?
What the hell?
Counterpoint. Silence.
It's hard to tell when I'm not visible. Counterpoint. The Dolphins are bad, yes, but also they have the easiest defensive schedule remaining amongst in fantasy. So for fantasy points scored in possible fantasy football weeks, they play the New York Jets again, the New York Giants, and we're not sure if they'll have a Week 16 win by then. Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh God,
you left the Eagles off of there, my man.
I was just saying playoff
during the fantasy playoffs.
Like
that's fair.
3 weeks, but yeah, also Eagles, Browns before that.
Oh
yeah,
that is a pretty nice lineup. That is saucy.
I'm being talked into
Clark's
being
back.
more excited.
He's twiddling his beard.
Y'all are making some fine points about why maybe I should be more excited about.
Clark's about to burn
Parker.
all of his fab to get DeVante Parker. You already have DeVante
I already have
Parker.
him everywhere.
What are you doing,
for 4
Clark?
weeks.
Why are you talking yourself off the bandwagon? You don't even have to go get him.
People should come at me with good DeVante Parker trade offers.
There
I'm
you
just
go.
saying, I will give you DeVante Parker for David Johnson. I'm willing to take that chance.
There you go. Look at that. All right, moving on in tidbits. We know that the Browns offense has sucked this season, but in case you need a reminder, Baker gave us a reminder both on the field by not getting it done against the Broncos and off the field by rocking a post-game outfit that made us worried he was going to leave the Browns for cigarettes and never come back. Thanks, Jordan. Baker, 27 for 42, 273 yards and a touchdown. The biggest crime, though, of this is the fact that Odell Beckham, in a game in which the Browns were behind and needed to throw their way back into it, Odell saw 6 targets. Someone explained to me how this player who you traded a buttload to get onto your team, who's one of the most talented receivers in the game, has averaged 8 targets per game this season and gets 6 in a more or less must-win game against a team that you probably could beat in a game that you were down, you needed to throw yourself into. Why is just asinine to me. And to this, I say that Odell Beckham, and stay tuned for this week's buy or sell piece on Fake Teams, Odell Beckham belongs on your bench until we see otherwise. I have no faith in this Browns offense anymore, in this passing game especially. Baker Mayfield is rattled out of his mind. Freddie Kitchens can't freaking goddamn coach an offense. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And for whatever reason, Odell Beckham is here stuck in this offense. Like, what the fuck? Eli Manning was able to get me 100 yards a game. Why can't fucking Baker Mayfield, the future of the Browns, get me 100 yards?
My only comment here is, as a society and certainly as sports fans, and sometimes even the fantasy industry is worse at this, we like to deify people one day and then crucify them the next. So I feel like Baker Mayfield has proven to be a jerk at every opportunity, but that doesn't mean that we can't be adults and not be so mean.
He's fine. Everyone goes through their struggles. It's more of the thing. It's not what is amazing to me is it's the offensive construction to the point where why are you not just force feeding the ball to Odell? Like why trade all of your pieces, all of these first round picks and all of these assets to get this guy on your team to be that piece, and then more or less just ignore him the entire season?
Yeah, I agree with the take completely. The football take. I just have this little thing in me that when I see someone getting picked on constantly, I kind of feel like I have to say, like, hey, let's not do that anymore, right? Like, yes, he totally deserves it. But why they aren't throwing to Odell is unfathomable. I know everyone was this offseason salivating over looking at what Eli can do and looking at what Baker Mayfield can do, but Eli apparently understood where his bread was buttered and at least would chuck it up to Odell, and we're not seeing that in Cleveland. So hopefully they can turn it around. Their schedule does get much better as the season closes out. I think your take on resting Odell for your fantasy team is a good one, because it's kind of like earlier this year when I was saying, hey, keep playing Jordan Howard until you see a reason not to. Well, now we've seen that reason not to, so you can get Miles Sanders in there. I think with Odell, we're at the point where keep benching him until you see a reason not to, but
Yeah, just similar to the conversations we were having for the first 4 weeks of the season about Kirk Cousins. I feel very similarly with Baker Mayfield, where the Vikings dialed up the play action rate a ton. They started taking shots further downfield and passing a little bit more often on early downs. And now Kirk Cousins is like sneaking into the MVP discussion. So much of football performance is just on the coaches entirely. And something that I chose to ignore in the offseason about the Browns was Freddie Kitchens' number of plays per game once he took over for the Browns. I think it was like 59 or something, which is perhaps the slowest in the league, 59 plays per game. It usually hovers in the mid to low 60s. If you can get to like 69 or 70, you're probably leading the league. If you hit 60 or 59, there you go, Clark, you're at the bottom of the league. We want as many plays in a game as possible, more opportunity to score points. I don't know if I personally have experienced rooting for a coach and then done an entire 180 on him as quickly as I have with Freddie Kitchens. I was promised that Todd Monken would come in and lead an air raid offense here, although he did have the slow play count on his record. I ignored that, but it's really unbelievable what they're doing. And he also doubled down on his donkeyism by declaring that Dontrell Hilliard is in fact the official third down running back of the Cleveland Browns.
What are we doing here?
And
what are we doing here, Cleveland?
And that when Kareem Hunt returns today, he said this, that he will definitely have a role. It's like, what? Okay, so running backs don't matter, but you still want good running backs on the field more than ones that aren't as good, right? Nick Chubb is amazing. The guy is a Pro Bowler, if not an All-Pro, and he's very good in all facets of the game. Why? And also, if you take the guy off the field and then you have designated running backs, now I'm fired up. If you have designated players, you are telling the defense what you're doing. I will always be able to tie everything back into Seattle. It's like, if you have one passing formation, the defense knows what you're doing. Why do that part for them? So why have Dontrell Hilliard, who's not as good of a pass catcher or runner or pass protector as Nick Chubb? It just, oh my God. Why?
It's amazing. And I understand that like everyone's going to be like, well, why did you ever put faith in the Browns? Like that's the narrative is there for like they were this offseason darling because of the moves they made. They put their faith in a coach who was able to get some things done in the second half of last year, but most likely was not their best option, and probably they should have looked out of house and tried to bring someone in to really kind of spice up and really take this offense to a next level. Yes, there's issues around their offensive line that they've addressed and that they haven't addressed, but it's just this is one of the things that frustrated me, and I'm sure Jordan can relate to this. During the Mike McCarthy Packers years, where it was just like Mike McCarthy wouldn't fucking change anything in this offense. And it was just this antiquated, like, ISO routes running with wide receivers. And that worked when Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson like shared a brain and could just throw back shoulder passes for all day. But then when Jordy Nelson got injured and they were still integrating DeVante Adams, like, what you need to do is then construct an offense that works with what the pieces you have and run and move forward with that. And the Browns just haven't done that. And what's flummoxing to me is that the Browns haven't done this when they have like some of the most talent on the offensive side of the ball in the pass catchers and in the running backs, and they have no idea how to scheme these guys open, no idea how to get the ball to them. And basically, while Sam Darnold is seeing ghosts because of how, that team, because of kind of Adam Gase, like, I feel like what's happening to Sam Darnold and the Jets is what's happening to Baker Mayfield and the Browns. Like, the Browns are making Baker Mayfield take a step back just in the way that the Jets are making Sam Darnold take a step back. And it's mind-blowing to me that this is where we are at with this team that had so much going for it in this offseason, has all of the pieces there, and they just can't put together a product onto the field. And it's like, what are we doing here? What's the point?
Sorry, last thing, I'll shut the hell up. Todd Monken gave us the number 3 overall quarterback in fantasy football, combined with Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick. They threw for 400 yards like every game.
Just do that again.
Just
take
let
that
him
offense.
run it.
Take that offense and just plop it right in here.
It's God. Anyway, sorry, Jordan, go for it, man.
Mike McCarthy was a pretty big football egotist with his offense. Like, this is going to be what we run, how we run, because I think it works. And he largely had earned that because he had won a Super Bowl. To the best of my knowledge, Freddie Kitchens and Adam Gase have not won Super Bowls as head coaches. So it's really perplexing to me. We kind of said this earlier in the season too, that it's really weird when you have like a super good play caller just kind of on staff but not doing anything. But yeah, this turns out to be a pretty big week for the those of us who thought that the Browns were maybe a 9-win team and the Ravens were going to win the AFC North. But 9 wins might have been overselling them even still.
I need the Cowboys kicker to not get 12 points. And just reacting to that. So while I'm sitting on my soapbox of morality tonight,
perfect.
I would just like to add, making mistakes and having confidence in yourself is fine. But when you realize that you're wrong, doubling down is the difference between a smart person and a stupid person. It's okay to admit you're wrong and try something else.
That absolutely seems like what is happening here. Like 100%. Now I'm not going to give it up.
Yeah. All right. Finally, in the tidbits, got some injury news. Nick stomping all over my turf here by reporting some of this early, but whatever. It's cool. I don't hold grudges. Adam Thielen left the Chiefs game early, re-aggravating his hamstring injury, which is less than ideal. Obviously, like we talked about, Preston Williams is out for the season, which sucks. Because he was putting together a pretty good rookie season. And Mark Walton, the running back for the Dolphins, is now suspended for 4 games due to performance-enhancing drugs or something like that. Substance abuse, I don't know, something like that. Deshaun Jackson is also set to have surgery to repair a core muscle, I guess. So he'll be out for the rest of the season. And then I haven't gotten an update on this, but Jacoby Brissett went down with an MCL sprain, and I don't know if there's a timetable yet addressed to that, but my guess is that he'll be missing 1 to 2 games. So
Brissett's was a little bit rough because it was like he got his ankle /foot rolled up on and then his knee rolled up on.
Yeah, it didn't look great.
He was listed as questionable, so I feel like maybe if they were really gunning for it, if it was like a playoff game, he would have been back in there. But I mean, Brian Hoyer did fine, kind of.
So. 3 touchdowns off the bench.
Yeah, the Brissett injury was just a mild MCL sprain, and from what I can tell, the ankle was okay. It might be like a low inversion ankle sprain, which is like a basketball sprain that you can just tape up and play on no problem. He might be back this week. Brissett might be back this week.
Well, there you go. Those were week 9 fantasy football tidbits. And before we get into our early fantasy playoff prep, we are going to take a quick ad break. All right, we are back from advertisements, and we are going to. This is Clark's idea, actually. So, Clark, why don't you introduce this? Tell us what we're talking about for the rest of the pod.
So there's a couple of different seasons within the fantasy football season. At first, you're just trying to get traction. You hope that your draft went well, and then you're trying to pick up guys that are coming out of nowhere in kind of the middle of the season. And we are approaching the end of the middle of the fantasy season. So the playoffs should be within view. You should have a good idea of what type of team that you're going to be. If you listen to us going into your fantasy playoffs, that's for sure. You're welcome. thanks to the Oracle and other great people like Nick and Jordan, and I get to come along, which is fun. So
And
you need
I
to start
host.
preparing. There we go. And frig. So this is the time where guys on your roster who are probably never going to start for you, but you think that they're too good to drop, are droppable when you can do things like backing up Dalvin Cook with Alexander Madison, or when you can start taking a shot on a guy like Tony Pollard when you're the Ezekiel Elliott owner. So it's time to start preparing. It's time to start looking at the fantasy playoff schedules finally, and it's time to start making those playoff runs.
So what we're going to do is we all have just kind of thoughts, ideas, advice, things that were percolating in our minds that we're going to just kind of discuss and talk about and kind of get the juices flowing as you do, like Clark said, get ready for the playoffs and start looking at your roster more as like these are players I could probably pass on because they're just not going to get me anything. Who can I add in their stead? And what are some strategies that you need to have going into it? So Clark, why don't you start us off? What is one thing that you're thinking people need to start kind of preparing for in the playoffs?
So I got a little excited and kind of blew my load early on this one. So it's time to start handcuffing your stud running backs. If someone is waiting for Alvin Kamara to come back and they've dropped Latavius Murray on the bye week, you need to go pick him up. All the Ezekiel Elliott owners need to get Tony Pollard, who's largely available in leagues. When a situation is good and you've been riding that guy all year, don't let an injury in week 13 be the end of your season. Go ahead and back up your stud running back now when it's super cheap, because you know you have the roster spot. Just go ahead and do it. Bite the bullet.
Yeah. I mean, because it's so often too that if you get any kind of ding, or what you get is you get the week 16, week 17, they rest their star running back because the team is already locked up the playoff seed. And now if you don't have, like, let's say I'm trying to think who would this most likely apply to. I was going to say Dalvin Cook, but I don't think the Vikings are going to be able to lock up a bye because they're always going to be playing for playoff position. But let's hypothetically say that is it. You don't want to get in a situation where the Vikings rest Dalvin Cook and you don't have Alexander Madison, or like Clark said, Ezekiel Elliott, and you don't have Tony Pollard. So I think having those guys on your roster is a huge point and a big advantage that you can give yourself once you get into that playoff push, because now you're not watching all of that production that your back had go to someone else.
Yeah, I think another unsexy name for that list is Gus Edwards. The Ravens are sitting comfortably in the lead in the AFC North, and at some point they'll probably want to give their, I think now 30-year-old running back Mark Ingram a little time to ride the pine, and invest in someone in the Niners backfield. They're undefeated right now. Yeah, that'd be an awesome one.
Play. And I picked up Justice Hill before the game last night as well, just to take out a shot on some Ravens running back. I think I probably shot for the stars and missed the single of picking up Gus Edwards. I think that's a better pick.
I love Justice Hill. I today, when the Deshaun Jackson news came out, I dropped him ahead of this game for Tony Pollard.
Another one to add to that list, I would go with Raquel Armstead to back up Leonard Fournette, because as we've seen, it hasn't happened so much this season, but Leonard Fournette tends to accumulate a lot of ding ticky-tack injuries that can just really derail his value. So
yeah, that's a great call because the Jaguars are basically, I saw some percentage numbers where it's basically like Leonard Fournette is 95% of their backfield. And so if he goes down, then there's this massive gaping hole that's just waiting for Michael Armstead to waltz right into. And they've already started using him in the passing game more.
Yeah, and I guess the synopsis of this tip is that I don't really like handcuffing at the beginning of the year and with my drafts, but things have changed now. So now you have a better idea of what to look for. So I think handcuffing at this time in the season is smarter. There we go. I should have written that down and said that.
And kind of in that vein, I'm not one who normally advocates for if you're playing in if you're playing in a 2-quarterback league, you should, or a super flex league, you should obviously have 2 quarterbacks in your roster. But if you're playing in a 1-quarterback league, I don't often advocate for having a backup quarterback on your roster just because that's another spot that can be used for a wide receiver or a running back. And for the most part, your quarterback's going to get you solid production unless there's garbage and you can start streaming, but and you just can stream for the bye. But I do think that as the playoffs come, if you are someone who has Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, or Patrick Mahomes as your starting quarterback, it might sound crazy, but you should think about getting yourself a backup quarterback because those 3 have the toughest schedules for the rest of the year. 4 of the 7 remaining games for Rodgers are against top 12 defenses and limiting quarterback production. The Chiefs close out with at Patriots, versus Broncos, at Bears, and versus Chargers. And Lamar has the 49ers, Buffalo, and Steelers in the last 5 weeks of the season. So that's 3 out of his last 5 games. So those are all tough matchups for quarterbacks. And you just want to make sure that similarly to handcuffing a running back, you want to make sure you have a guy on your roster who, if you get one bad game out of an Aaron Rodgers or a Patrick Mahomes, that you have someone you can quickly throw in. Meanwhile, like Ryan Tannehill, Jimmy G, Nick Foles / Minshew, whoever they ride with, Sam Darnold and Jameis Winston, those guys all have the easiest schedules rest of the way, with Jameis highlighting that list. And a lot of those guys are still readily available on waiver wires. So those are names that you could quickly stash, have on your roster if there is a must-win game and you've got a really tough matchup at one of if it's Rodgers, Lamar, or Mahomes, you can then have someone to fill in moving forward.
Similarly, that was going to be kind of a tidbit that I had in terms of quarterbacks and making sure you have like a decent backup. But I was going to make it as an addendum to that. Make sure you have a guy that isn't about to be. I'm going to use Jimmy Garoppolo actually as the example. He's on an 8-0 team right now. Mm-hmm. If they end up walking into week 16 and they're 15-0, 14-1, they're probably very likely not going to be playing Jimmy Garoppolo, or just given his injury history, they know what they have with Nick Mullins. So quarterbacks who are running away with their division, with the number 1 seed in the conference, they are very risky to kind of be hanging your playoff and possible championship bet on. So you're going to want somebody who's still got something to play for down the stretch.
Yeah, and I don't mean to wrest the reins from Pete yet again, but my second one is it's time to start looking at your quarterback situation if you have been streaming quarterbacks, and it's time to start looking at schedules. So like you mentioned, Pete, the Jaguars host the Chargers, they're at the Raiders, and then at the Falcons. Whether that's Gardner Minshew or Nick Foles, you could do a lot worse.
That's a good lineup
than taking a shot on those guys. The Browns, I know we've been talking about Baker Mayfield a little bit, host the Bengals, at the Cardinals, and then they host the Ravens week 16. So that was tough. But then the Giants have the Eagles, host the Dolphins, and then at Washington. So Daniel Jones might be a good one to look. We're coming off the bye weeks. People are going to start dropping these guys if they haven't already. And Pete, couldn't agree with you more. During the season, if you have a good quarterback, do not waste a roster spot. But again, this is that time of the year where you can go ahead and start making those preparations for your playoff run.
Like one game is what matters. Or if you're playing, 2 weeks and you accumulate it's now come down to, it's not a whole collection of the year. It's now 1 or 2 games. You need to make sure that you have the pieces on your roster that if you need to suddenly make a change or things go kind of haywire, you have the pieces there that you're able to quickly adapt and adjust.
So I want to make two quick points for this playoff stuff. They're contradictory, so that'll be fun. First off,
yes, on brand for the RB1 podcast.
Yeah, I got you guys. So first off, try to acquire if you're still allowed to make some trades, which you should be because it'd be really early, try to acquire both AJ Green and Christian Kirk. AJ Green has stated that he wants to return for this week. It's week 10. He's only said that recently. We would have told you to get him sooner if he'd let us know earlier. But anyway, he has said that he wants to come back this week against the Ravens. It's a divisional opponent, and he has returned to practice today. So go get yourself some AJ Green and probably start him immediately.
I've been holding on to him on my bench for this entire season just for this moment.
Yeah. It is a very difficult matchup, but there's a good shot that they just drop bombs all day long towards him. I don't think that the ankle has really been the issue. I think he's more or less just kind of held out because he wants a new contract and he didn't get it. So I expect him to be pretty damn healthy at this point. I mean, well, anyway, we don't need to get into all the injury stuff, but I think he's healthy and I think that he's going to be heavily targeted. Outside of that, Christian Kirk has seen just awesome workloads. He does have a bit of a difficult schedule, but, he mans the slot. So next few games, actually worth starting with here. In one of his games so far in week 4, he did get hurt halfway through. Outside of that, his fully healthy games, his target totals are 12, 8, 12, 5, 11, and 5. That's awesome usage. He's got Tampa Bay and San Francisco coming up. Tampa Bay is phenomenal matchup. San Francisco in the slot is also a phenomenal matchup. Then he goes on bye. After that, the Rams, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Seattle. It's a little mixed in terms of schedule strength, but if you have a receiver who's probably going to be either your wide receiver 2 or flex option who is getting double-digit targets or should be able to get double-digit targets, that's awesome. Now, all that being said, don't really bother with targeting players. Just go look at your league. There are teams that have big needs. There are teams that are in dead last. Maybe you're in a keeper league and they need some young, cheap players to keep next year. Maybe there's another team that's making a playoff push and you're already in first and you want to give them some, one stud to go get 2 badass guys. Probably don't do that. Ship them 2 players and go get yourself 1 stud. But the point is, look at your league and try to figure out who needs what and see if you have something that matches up. Trying to identify specific players can oftentimes lead you down just frustrating roads where someone goes, no, I'm not giving you that one guy, so shut up. Everyone has a weakness. If you can find someone's weakness, exploit it.
Yeah, I like the advice. And just in general, the 2-for-1 is the way to go. I have a guy in my league who is maddeningly good at the 2-for-1 trade, and everyone talks about it every year, and then he rolls into the playoffs with just a stellar lineup. And yeah, the core of the advice, I think, is being flexible instead of focusing on one person that you really want and spending all of your attention there. Don't be afraid to make a few offers because there's a lot of good guys out there. We have a pretty good idea of who's good and who's not. So there's lots of options. Package something up and try to really build that team that is just going to crush it in the playoffs.
And also persevere. Sometimes you get some really negative responses like, fuck no. When you make a trade offer, just keep trying. Sometimes people are dicks. That doesn't mean they won't make a trade with you if you keep trying hard enough. So stay strong, you guys. Take those rejections.
Nick's advice,
Go ahead,
stay strong.
I like Nick hopping up on the soapbox.
Yeah,
giving some life advice.
this.
Persevere, guys.
I like this.
Yeah.
Stay strong.
No, exploit their weaknesses. Persevere.
Can I add to that trade etiquette point?
Of course.
For anybody who's listening, maybe you're in a dynasty league or even just a regular redraft league. If you get a trade offer from somebody else in your league, consider the trade offer. If you don't like it, then reject it. If you would be like, I would consider moving the person that they want, then make a new offer. They're not going to give you their best offer right away, so you're automatically a winner. It's a lowball offer that they're going to. It's up to you to negotiate that price. That's how it works. So, do a little back and forth if you're interested in making a deal. It's not a one deal, take it or leave it type of thing.
Yeah, Jordan, I like that point a lot. I think sometimes trade offers get thrown out, and whether you are on the receiving end and you think it's like appalling, or you send one to someone and they're like, go fuck, they send you like some stacked trade just to be like, fuck you. People value players differently. right? Like there's a reason we have to do rankings every week. We all value players really differently. And sometimes those are genuine offers. Don't pass something up. I really like that point, Jordan. Don't just send a no or like a big negative response. Try to understand if they have legit trade interest and send some counters, because things can come out of nowhere. I've had trades already on the books and then revisited it with that same person, and suddenly it went from a 2-player trade to like a 6-player trade just because we were so into the idea of making a big move. So always explore your options. Never shut someone down immediately, or if you get shut down, keep working on it. Something can happen.
And that's from personal experience too, because I am always going to try to come out as the winner in a trade when I first send out an offer, but I'm willing to compromise down to both people at least think they have won type of deal.
And another soapbox moment. Hey, be polite. You guys
generally treat people with respect.
I'm feeling really good about this podcast tonight, guys.
We talked about running backs. And I want to quickly touch on a theme that's also not only kind of handcuffing backs, but it's another thing where it's because we've talked so much about like players to add, players to get onto your roster. How do you prepare? There's also important to talk about players who you can safely drop, who are players that you can move on from. And I think that you'll see this trend. We've already seen it kind of come to fruition, but this is the time of the year when it does, is when those older veteran starters at running back get replaced by the younger rookie or younger player who they're kind of expecting them to do things. 2 names that jump off the page to me: Frank Gore in Buffalo. Devin Singletary has become basically the go-to back there, and has been seeing a lot more of the workload and has been producing. So I think Frank Gore is a safe name to drop. And Peyton Barber in Tampa Bay. Ronald Jones is coming off of a huge week, and Nick is freaking out right now. and Bruce Arians has said that Ronald Jones has now worked his way to this, basically the starting role, and is going to see more touches. And so I think over the next couple of weeks, you're going to start seeing that more and more, where you're going to see younger players come in and take over that incumbent starting role from that veteran. And it's okay. Be comfortable with the idea of then dropping that veteran and going to get someone else on that waiver wire. Frank Gore, Peyton Barber. I don't know if this is going to happen yet, but Darius Geis is now practicing and playing. And if he looks good and he looks healthy, he's going to eat into Adrian Peterson's workload. And Adrian Peterson, they're going to want to, kind of push Geis up and give him a chance to succeed. That could be another opportunity there to drop a veteran player and kind of free up a roster space. But that's a trend to definitely look for as the season in the next couple of weeks when you're trying to free roster spaces up to make moves.
Yeah, there's been a lot of focus on running back, obviously. And I think just the key is that it's so much easier to predict running back. When a wide receiver goes down, 2 or 3 guys might pick up the slack, and that's tough. And you're going to have to make those decisions probably in your fantasy playoffs. But there's just countless examples, all of which are escaping my head right now of, blank running back who we weren't really even sure was in the league. Weeks 15, 16, and 17 won championships. I'm thinking like the Saints before they picked up Mark Ingram. There was always
Tim Hightower.
Yes,
Boom,
thank you.
There you go.
Like that's going to happen, and we know that it is, and it's going to be a lot easier to predict that after an injury at running back than it is, like if Christian Kirk can't play anymore, like where is all that production going to go in Arizona? Like that, this is going to be a lot harder to do. So focus on where we have a better shot, and that's getting in early on these running backs instead of trying to wait when everyone is going for them. And in the fantasy playoffs, you're going to be playing as better players, so it's going to be harder to get these guys.
Love the idea of what we're talking about here too. What is dead may never die, Frank Gore, but he hasn't scored double-digit points since week 4 of the fantasy season. If he isn't already not in your lineup, maybe he belongs on the waivers by now. Buffalo, additionally, is the 6th best rush offense by DVOA. In addition to Darius Geis, if he gets the chance to take over, especially if the breadsticks feel like they're in a position where it's like, hey, we got to start seeing what our young guys can do. I can also see them turning to Geis. BT Dub, he's only 32.6% owned in ESPN leagues currently, and Washington has the number 5 easiest schedule for running backs.
Darius Geis. He belongs on your fantasy roster. I'm so excited. I've been waiting for him. He's another player who I've been waiting for to break out.
Man, those breadsticks. I am just like, starting to really be concerned for their players. I don't know if it's just that we're hearing the same
that's fair.
story over and over and over, and so it feels like it's happening really often. But it seems like that a lot of guys that get injured in Washington just have a really, really hard time coming back. And again, I'm trying to tease out, is it just we know the story and so it's being told repeatedly, or if there is like a serious problem going on down there?
Yeah, they've had more players come back too early from injury and then require another injury because of that than any other team in the league over the last. I think I'm trying to remember who was discussing this, but it was over the last few years. The most any other team I think had was one, and they're at like 3 or 4.
I mean, they legit misdiagnosed Trent Williams to having cancer, and we're just like, no, you don't. Don't worry about that.
Totally, yeah. Alex Smith has had 17 surgeries on his broken leg.
Yo, did you see their Halloween photo? They had their family Halloween photo. It was a very fun play on the whole thing. He was a beachgoer who was being attacked by sharks, which were his kids, and then his wife was the lifeguard. But you saw his leg out of a cast. That thing is a tree trunk. Like, that's not healing at all. He doesn't have a calf muscle. Like, it is just swollen from hip to ankle. It does not look good. It does not look good.
So, and it's a really interesting phenomenon, Clark, because their head doctor, Dr. James Andrews, is like the most well-respected surgeon.
But he also fucked up all of Gronk's things.
And so, what's going on there? Is the medical staff clearing them too early? Is the doctor washed up? Something is happening because Darius Guice never should have come back as early as he did.
Yeah.
He had, again, 3 cleanup surgeries.
Yeah, because Gronk had
is crazy.
This was the same thing with Gronk's forearm. Why he had that massive arm cast for the rest of his career, because he had like 4 different surgeries on his forearm, and David Andrews was the guy who did all of that.
And there's a lot going on here with the specific doctor. It's tough to get into how much authority this person has, and the more at bats you have, the more strikeouts you're going to have. But it's concerning, and you should pick up Darius Guice, but we're on the Soapbox podcast, so I'm concerned for the football players in Washington.
RB1 pulling a Soapbox podcast.
Yeah. I endorse your message there, Clark. I do think that there is a very real element that exists with Darius Guice that doesn't exist with other football players in the league, because he is a guy playing for a team that has shown that they are willing to put players on the field who are not ready. And that isn't something that we see. We see that with concussions. We see that with things that aren't visible to the eye, but we don't see that with like a guy who's limping.
Right.
It's a little different. Anyway, in theory, Guice is a good ad. He scares the hell out of me, and I don't think I'm going to be putting any money on him.
Oh, I love him. Before we go into, since this is an excellent transition into top waiver wire ads for Week 10, is there any other playoff prep advice that you guys wanted to throw out before we head on to waiver wire ads for Week 10?
I have one last one. I do not win my leagues very often, but when I do, I like to throw at least one entry fee to some charity, and Fantasy Cares is a good one. It's a good tradition to get going in your league. It's hard to tell someone, hey, you should spend your money this way, but you can lead by example. You just want a bunch of money that you shouldn't have had anyway. There's a lot of kids out there that don't get Christmas. Throwing them an extra $100 or something is a really awesome thing to do. It's super selfish too, because you feel great. So you should do that.
I have another one that's not as nice as Clark's. It's not. It's actually more selfish, arguably, but it's to help your fantasy team out. Once we get to the December month here, I'm calling it the kicker rule, which is watch out for those weather reports. You don't want to be starting a kicker or like a quarterback probably when there's a blizzard in Green Bay, in New York, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. You just don't want to have to deal with that. We already got a little bit of a taste of that this season when I believe it was the Vikings when they went to Washington, and it was
It was
slip and slide
49ers.
match.
49ers, yeah.
Yeah, and it was basically a slip and slide match, which kind of, I don't know if I had too many players in that game, but it definitely caught me off guard, and I live here. So you just kind of be aware of it. And, kickers count too. So if there's swirling winds or flurries, it's harder for them to kick unless you're Adam Vinatieri. And it's just a little extra effort can help you win a championship here.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I want to jump on and say when the weather conditions are bad, coaches will sometimes not even give guys the same chance at like a 35-yard field goal. And since you are guessing, you just want a team that's going to score a lot of points. Great advice. If there's a toss up between two people and you have one game in a dome and another game where there may be high winds, like just bail and take the safer option.
Amen. Awesome. Week 10 top waiver wire ads. You're adding one guy off waivers or multiple because we have done that a few times. Who are you adding? Nick, let's start with you.
For me, it is someone that we already talked about today. It's DeVante Parker. That target funnel is about to come his way really hard with Preston Williams out for the rest of the year. We already talked about the schedule, I believe. I mean, there's some pretty exploitable matchups on there. I think he's a lock for double digits. And at this point in the season, if you can get someone who's 36% owned, who's going to get 10 targets a game, that's someone you got to go after.
100% agree. Clark's already got him. He doesn't even need to go after him.
Sorry, the two leagues that I'm in, guys. You hosed. Yeah, I like Parker, and I have two real quick. One's kind of a cheater. QB stream, Daniel Jones is, running and passing, whether you think he's good at quarterback, it's not. He is a good fantasy option, and he's got the Jets next week. So he's a good pickup. And the folks are dropping like flies in Indianapolis. We'll have to watch the Jacoby Brissett situation closely. But Brian Hoyer is a very serviceable NFL quarterback, and when he's surrounded by good pieces, he is good enough to keep an offense going. So Zach Pascal has had a couple of good games, and he's widely available. I think he's like 18% owned or something. So you could do a lot worse if there's someone really smart and handsome in your league who already has DeVante Parker. Maybe Zach Pascal would be a good good second prize.
Well, he's interesting because Paris Campbell broke his hand, so he's going to be out for a second too.
I mean, Zach Pascal is that offense when T.Y. is out. He's been great. I 100% endorse that pick. The guy who I want you to go get, I already talked about. I got excited about Darius Geis a little earlier, so I won't reiterate what I had to say. But Nick, this is for you. Jacob Hollister, baby, expatriate news, Seahawks #1 tight end in the world. Going to replace all of that Will Dissly does. We know we've talked a lot on this podcast before about just what a Seahawks tight end can do. And in this offense, because they love looking at that around the goal line. But I do want to quickly tell you, if I can pull it up in time, Jacob Hollister. The Seahawks schedule, as we were talking playoffs, as we were talking about the fantasy playoffs, but the rest of their schedule, they play San Francisco, which is tough, but then Philly, Minnesota, the Rams, the Carolina, and then they finish with Arizona and 49ers. Arizona obviously giving up the most points to tight ends. I think that he is someone, if you need help at tight end and you needed someone to stream, he's a good name to get on your roster because you know what tight ends can do in Seattle, and there's a pretty good schedule for him going forward.
Will Dissly is still the tight end 9.
That's preposterous.
That's how garbage tight end has become.
Yes.
So is Travis Kelce worth a first-round pick? Yes.
No. Oh, sorry.
Oh God, we can't get into that, Clark. But Pete Carroll is like the original version of artificial intelligence. And the one thing that he learned in his time as a head coach is to use a tight end in the red zone after Jimmy Graham blew out his knee. And they were like, all right, now we can't use him as a blocker. But I am not optimistic that Hollister is going to really be a whole lot. What's funny is I liked Hollister a lot in New England. I think I wrote an article at one point saying that he was going to be the next like Aaron Hernandez compliment to Gronk. But they did say Carroll, I believe it was not John Schneider today, did say that they basically went out and got Josh Gordon to be that tight end, the in the like middle of the field target. So I don't know.
Fire up Josh Gordon then.
God, he's good. Yeah, 3 targets, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. You're gonna be so frustrating. He's gonna get him an exit. All right, I gotta sign off with that. I can't get into a new Seahawks rant.
Jordan, who you adding off waivers?
Clark, unplug your headphones real quick. It is Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was only 4% owned in ESPN leagues. We already talked about how easy and soft the Dolphins' upcoming schedule is. I mean, granted, the Dolphins are conversely going to be the easiest team that those teams also play left on their schedule. But don't let that deter you from seeing that Ryan Fitzpatrick has thrown 7 touchdowns in the past 4 games since he's taken over. He lost Preston Williams, which is a pretty big loss. But if this past game by Mike Gesicki is any indication, it might be that the second-year tight end might be putting some things together. And DeVante Parker.
Ryan Fitzpatrick is the epitome of what I would like to coin as the tailored pants move, because it's going to be hard for you to sit down or find pants that fit if you got balls that big to start Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I love it.
Oh, excellent. Well, there you go. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, the whole 9 yards. Leave us a review. Give us 5 stars. Tell us you love us. If you leave any comments or questions in your comments, we will make sure to answer them on the podcast. So look for that. If you leave a question, we'd love to answer it. Follow us on Twitter at RB1 Podcast. You can follow myself at Pete M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark. Jordan at Jordan_Smith27. And Nick at Ginger__Nick without a K. We will be back at you on Thursday to talk Week 10 starts and sits. Until then, peace.
Cowboys. What the fuck is going on? Anything you need them to do, they don't do it. This is why Cowboys fans.
Dude, you and I are tit for tat on this one. I need a big Dak Prescott showing, so that touchdown being called back and then having it go to the kicker. Neither of us wanted that.
Gosh dang it!
Gosh dang it!